There's this life and no hereafter. I'm sure of that. But still I dither, waiting for my laggard soul to leap at the world's touch. How many May dawns have I slept right through, the trees courageous with blossom? Let me number them. I shall be weighed in the balance and found wanting. I shall reckon for less than an apple pip. Hello, and welcome to Words That Burn, the podcast taking a closer look at poetry. This week's poem is Blossom by Scottish poet Kathleen Jamie. For the last little while, I've been struggling to properly engage with poetry. It happens. Life distracts, and you find yourself drifting from the things that help you to stay anchored. As I often do in that situation, I pick up anthologies of poetry. Their value cannot be overstated. And I begin to flick to random pages. Then I read whatever poem comes up. It could be good, it could be bad, it could be somewhere in the middle, but I have to read it. This is how I found Blossom. And I doubt I could have done much better in finding a poem that could advise me on my drifting. It's a deceptively simple poem on the surface. 3 strong stanzas delivered directly, but with a powerful message underneath them. Then again, we'd expect no less from Kathleen Jamie. A writer of both poetry and essays, praised for her prowess in both forms in equal measure. Accuracy and the avoidance of grandiose romanticising has always been a hallmark of her writing and poetic voice. This is particularly true of her writings on nature. Indeed, the overarching narrative of much of her poetry has been a reverence of nature and landscape, with a special graw for Scotland's natural world. All of this leads to a questioning of humanity's connection with that natural world. This focus and core question has placed her work firmly within eco-poetics, verse that focuses on drawing connections between human activity, specifically the writing of poems, and the environment that produces it. This avoidance of the grandiose has led to Jamie producing beautiful, often stark and haunting portrayals of a realistic natural world. One that does not shy from the realities, as Tennyson put it, of a nature red in tooth and claw. This realistic depiction is as much out of respect for the natural world as it is a bid for accuracy in documenting it. Kathleen Jamie herself has stated, "You take notes almost like a naturalist who observes something, whether it is a flower or a street scene. It is not out of curiosity, but you almost respect what you are observing. You want to have what you observe accurately in its beauty and detail. And so it is almost a mark of respect for it." In that same interview, she goes on to state that such a practice of observation and respect becomes a meditation, something that prompts her towards a consideration of her own and indeed humanity's place within the world. Strained as a result of modernity though it may be, this kind of meditation is surely what prompts this poem. It carries a distinctly existential tone, as do most poems that centre around mortality. There can be no doubt of the subject matter being pondered here, as it's made clear by the first stanza and its reader-stopping opening line. There's this life and no hereafter. I'm sure of that. But still I dither, waiting for my laggard soul to leap at the world's touch. Those first 2 lines are as solid as oak. They are unwavering in their assertion that this is it. Where we draw breath now is the final destination. Once more there is that idea of avoiding the romanticisation of life, or in this case, death. Such a strong opening statement prompts us as readers to pay attention. Then Jamie does a wonderful thing. She reasserts her natural humanity by contradicting those stoic, unbending openers with, "But still I dither waiting." Our speaker knows that this is it, and yet in the most human of fashions, they are pottering about as though they have forever to go. There is purpose in their waiting. Their soul is tired and has become, in Jamie's words, a laggard, or one who is slow and sluggish in action. Rather than do something about that, they are placing the onus on the world to jolt them into action once more. They want their lives to leap at the world's touch. In this opening stanza, we see many of the recurring themes of Jamie's work prominently front and centre. She often writes on the acceptance of her own mortality as a natural, inevitable occurrence. There is often also a complete denial of there being any spiritual element to it. Jamie has gone on record to say that death is one of the great ties to the natural world, reminding humans of their place in the natural order. In her own words, "I don't know about you, but I don't want to live forever, and I don't want my children to live forever. I can accept my mortality. It's what we are. We're mortal creatures." Despite this matter-of-fact stance on mortality, our speaker expresses a longing to leap at the world's touch nonetheless. And so we come to understand that there is something much deeper at play in this reflection. A little more light is shed on what exactly is being contemplated in the second stanza. "How many May dawns have I slept right through? The trees courageous with blossoms. Let me number them." The introspection marches on, and the speaker addresses a question to themselves. "How many May dawns have I slept right through?" It is rhetorical, meant more as a metaphor for wasted opportunity than a question that has an actual answer. May, after all, is the season when things blossom, invoking the poem's title and meant to serve as a highlighting of the beauty of that time. And yet, our speaker has not seized the day, has not gone out to see the beauty for themselves. Their laggard soul has instead stayed in bed. I'd imagine, though I don't want to speak for you, listener, that you have felt this kind of gentle internal shaming at some point, much like I have. How many wonderful moments have I missed? How many beautiful summer mornings did I fail to take stock of? That is exactly what our speaker is dealing with. They have taken the natural world for granted, and their reverence for it has evaporated. We get the sense that they would indeed leap at the world's touch if only they paid a little more attention. Abruptly, the nature of the poem, the trees carrying the blossom, are anthropomorphized by Jamie, given the very human attribute of being courageous. Jamie's speaker praises them for doing what they cannot, or simply will not do. The trees are growing, and most importantly, showing up, summer after summer. The deliberate observation of the natural world that Jamie spoke of, mentioned earlier in this episode, is the cure for this sleepwalking through nature. The speaker states, "Let me count them." They could be referring to the wasted mornings, or they could be referring to those courageous trees. They intend to engage in the meditative observation of the natural world lauded by the poet. It's at this point we can probably comfortably say that Jamie and her speaker are one. Obviously, the notion that you could count your mornings, or indeed all the trees in bloom, is hyperbole, the deliberate exaggeration of something for poetic effect. Even more exaggerated by the inclusion of the 3 dots or ellipses at the end of the second stanza. It acts as a visual symbol of time passing, or the speaker actually engaging in that act of counting. It gives us, the reader, a moment to pause before continuing to the next stanza. I shall be weighted in the balance and found wanting. I shall reckon for less than an apple pip. The notion of hyperbole acts as a springboard into a much broader pool of poetic thinking in the third stanza. Now we are to believe that time has passed and the speaker has finished their great act of counting. They are looking to the future. They are seeing their moment of weighing. They state, I shall be weighed in the balance and found wanting. These lines bear a remarkable resemblance to the lines in the King James Bible in the book of Daniel. Thou art weighted in the balance and art found wanting. As the story goes, in the ancient city of Babylon, King Belshazzar threw a grand feast to show off his extravagant wealth and power. During the celebration, he drank from sacred stolen goblets, pilfered from Jewish temples. This act of hedonism showed great disrespect and abandonment of reverence. Naturally, the Hebrew god grew furious, as any self-respecting deity might. They conjured a mysterious, nay, ineffable hand that daubed strange words on the wall. Mene mene tekel upharsin. No one could understand the message except for Daniel, who revealed that it meant the king had been judged and found lacking. The prophecy warned that Belshazzar would soon lose his kingdom for his failure to recognize God. Additionally, though possibly apocryphally, this story is said to be the origin of the phrase, the writing is on the wall, meaning that an unavoidable, unpleasant fate is clear. If the Bible isn't really your vibe, you may have heard an approximation of the same line in the 2001 film A Knight's Tale, starring Heath Ledger. And honestly, to each their own. It's where I heard the line for the first time, too. I don't for a second believe that our speaker thinks they will encounter a god at the end of their time. The opening stanza is evidence enough of this. But I do think that the allusion to the Bible is meant to invoke the negative consequences of a failure to revere and respect. Though in the work of Kathleen Jamie, that would definitely be a reference to nature, as opposed to a singular God with a capital G. The final two lines of the poem seem to support this idea. The minor self-flagellation of our speaker for their own lack of seeing the beauty in nature reaches a crescendo here. And when they are weighed, they will reckon for less than an apple pip. I really like these final lines, as I believe they are a little more tongue-in-cheek than a serious admonishment of self. The notion of an apple pip being used as a unit of measure here feels like a reference to Egyptian mythology to me. The weighing of a soul against a feather by Anubis. Though the imagery of soul weighing has been common in many religions throughout history, most notably perhaps for this poem, in medieval Christianity. The inclusion of the apple pip is a beautiful touch by Jamie, as it replaces a feather or other such hyper-religious and symbolism-laden images with something much more abundant in nature, particularly Scottish nature. It is our speaker's final punishment. Their life of oblivious ignorance has amounted to them being found wanting. It would be easy to write Blossom by Kathleen Jamie off as bleak or self-defeated. But to me, it is a call to action, a reminder to those that read it that deliberate attention is key to a life well lived. It does not matter if you choose to focus on nature. You may choose to focus on art, cinema, sport, whatever. The point being is that deliberate, intentional observation of the world around you is what leads to a better time within it and far less missed opportunities. In a world where the term attention economy has become all too common a phrase, I think this poem serves as a reminder that to leap at the world's touch is to pay attention to your own. Kathleen Jamie reminds us of this with a poem that brims with beautiful imagery and allusions, brought about by her own observations in the world. The poem's title holds the key to it all. Blossom, a gentle reminder from the courageous trees that it's never too late to bloom again, and that there will always be another opportunity to try again. What did you think of the poem? As always, this is my interpretation, but I'd love to hear yours. If you'd like to get in touch with me, there are a few ways to do so. You can reach me directly by email at wordsthatburnpodcast@gmail.com. You can get in touch through the podcast website, www.wordsthatburnpodcast.com. I'm on Twitter or X at WordsThatBurn. I'm on Instagram at WordsThatBurnPodcast. I'm on TikTok at WordsThatBurn2. And we're also on Substack, where you can find the script of this week's podcast complete with citations and references to everything used. The link is below in the description. If you've enjoyed this episode or know someone who might, consider sending it to them directly, or even better, leaving me a review wherever you listen. I would really appreciate it. Words That Burn is written and produced by me, Benjamin Colopy. Thank you once again for taking the time to listen to the podcast, and hopefully you'll hear from me again soon.